Okay, so let's call the meeting to order and a roll call, please.
Veranda,
Here.
Castroville,
Here.
County of Monterey,
Here.
Delray Oaks,
Here.
Marina Coast,
Here.
Monterey,
Here.
Pacific Grove,
Here.
Salinas, here, Sand City, here, Seaside. And we have a quorum.
All right, thank you very much. And if I could ask Director Stefani to lead us in the pledge, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Director Stefani. We go to agenda item 4. Are there any additions to the agenda from directors or from our general manager?
No additions.
All right, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
Move approval.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, very good. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on the approval of the agenda? All right, seeing none, we'll vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous. We go to agenda item 6, public comment. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters not appearing on the agenda may do so now for not more than 3 minutes. Comments on any other matter listed on the agenda are welcome at the time the matter is being considered by the board. We see any attendees raising their hands?
Don't see any raised hands from the public.
All right, then we'll move on to agenda item 7, which is a special acknowledgement and proclamation recognizing Stormwater Awareness Week, which runs September 25th to September 29th. I don't know who set that week. It isn't exactly the rainy season here. Well, it ain't
Optimism.
the optimism, right? Any questions about stormwater? Anyone care to make a motion to approve the proclamation?
No move.
Second. All right. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on the motion to approve the proclamation of Stormwater Awareness Week, September 25th to 29th, 2023? All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Once again, unanimous. Thank you. All right, we move on to agenda item 8. I don't know, does the public want to see the beautiful plaque that we're going to be able to hang on the wall? I'll pass that around.
Sure. Very nice. Hold on.
We move to the consent agenda. Do any directors wish to pull anything from consent? Seeing none, do any members of the public wish to pull anything from consent?
Move approval of consent.
Is there a second? Thank you very
Second.
much. All right. Guess we should give the public an opportunity. Seeing none. All right, bring it back for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Once again, unanimous. Thank you very much. We go to committee reports, budget and personnel. Anything to report?
Move approval.
To receive the report, or actually receive the draft minutes?
Yep.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on the motion? Seeing none, we'll bring it back for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous. We go to Projects and Planning Committee. Is there a motion to receive the draft minutes?
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? All right, we'll go out to the public. All right, seeing none, we'll bring it back for a vote to receive the Projects and Planning Committee minutes of their meeting on September 13th. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Any abstentions? Again, please show unanimous. We move on to Recycled Water Committee. Anything to report? Motion, would anyone care to make a motion to receive the draft minutes?
So move.
Second.
All right, thank you. We have a motion and a second. We'll go out to the public. Seeing no comments from the public, we'll bring back for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous again. All right, we get to action items. Item 10A. Mr. Giotto.
Actually, we're going to pass this off to Mr. Lindau.
Good evening, Chair Moore, board members. The purpose of this action item is for the board to consider awarding construction for the second bid package of expansion, Pure Water Monterey expansion injection well phase 4. Some quick background. You may remember this is the job we rebid because the first bid had some irregularities. Happy to report that the original 3 bidders rebid and we actually got a 4th bidder. It's also interesting to note that all 3 of the original bidders came in lower in the first bid. In fact, we saved $2 million by rebidding. Apparently the drillers, which is a big component of this project, we got some extra drillers competing for that work. So the general contractor who hires the driller, they had more subcontractors shot from that, brought the price down. Also important is that Specialty Construction, who we're recommending award for, 23,899,000 and change. They also built phase 2 and phase 3. In fact, with the same driller, Majora Brothers out of Watsonville. So it's very encouraging. We have a lot of faith in this contractor. We're happy how those 2 projects turned out. So with that, I open it up to questions.
Directors, any questions? All right, seeing none. Anyone care to make a motion to approve the award of the construction contract to Specialty Construction?
We got to the public first, maybe for.
If the public, sure. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this item before we've made a motion?
Go ahead and move approval.
Okay, thank you very much. We have a motion and a second, and no one from the public wanted to comment on the savings of $2 million. Thank you very much, Mr. Lindau and staff. So bring it back for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed? Any abstentions? Please show unanimous.
Thank you. We'll get these guys started.
Yeah, well done.
Yes, well done. Thank you very much. Round of applause, actually, for staff. Anytime we can save $2 million for our ratepayers, I'll be happy to join you in taking it. Okay, let's get to agenda item 10B. Mr. Shuko.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So just want to give a little background on this and then let Jim Gilpin talk about the agreement in and of itself. So the background, as you may know, we've had previously an exclusive negotiating agreement with Cal-Am regarding the outfall. Since about 2015, just that we would negotiate in good faith. It was also a reimbursement agreement where they would fund work that we're doing on their behalf. That agreement expired, and while we were working on it, we also received a request from Marina Coast Water District to have capacity in the outfall. So what you have before you now is not exclusive. It's a negotiating agreement, talks about cooperation as well as that funding component. At this point, we worked very closely with Cal-Am, both their president, a number of their attorneys, and local staff to come up with agreement before you. It is, and I'll let Jim get into it, it is saying we'll continue to negotiate with them. It is also that reimbursement, which is the key component, because there's a fair amount of work that needs to happen on the permitting side of the project for Cal-Am. Jim, is there anything else that I need to talk about from a background perspective before you jump into this?
I don't think so, Paul.
Okay.
You have the agreement before you. As Paul indicated, it is a agreement to negotiate, to cooperate, and for Cal-Am to fund efforts undertaken by M1W and any third-party consultants we would hire as part of this effort. The negotiation agreement part would be to allow us to negotiate with Cal-Am to use a portion of the uncommitted capacity in the outfall channel for their proposed desal project. As part of that desal project, they are proposing outfall improvements to support their project. And as a result, while we're negotiating, studies would be being prepared, efforts would be undertaken by M1W staff and third-party consultants retained by M1W and Cal-Am to prepare the studies necessary to pursue an amendment of our NPDES permit. So that permit would have to be amended to allow for the discharge of brine associated with that proposed desal project. There would have to be also likely have to be an amendment of the Coastal Commission. There would have to be a Coastal Commission permit to allow for the construction of those outfall facilities, and likely an amendment of our existing State Land Commission lease to support where those new outfall improvements would be located. As part of the agreement, Cal-Am will be making a deposit, which will be drawn down by us to cover our costs and costs of third-party consultants. The estimated costs of this, our staff and outside staff, would be a total of $1,225,000. I would note we substituted a new Appendix B into the staff report because that total line wasn't clear. It was just showing the total of anticipated third-party costs at $1,450,000. And so those total costs have now been included in there, separating out our anticipated staff time versus third-party time. So I'm happy to answer any questions. Allison, who's a lot more familiar with all the details regarding what's going to have to be done, is here as well. I won't put her on the bus, but she is here to answer any questions.
Did you just put her on the bus or under it?
I'll leave that to you.
Directors, questions on this item? So hearing none, I do have a question. Paul, refresh my memory. At some point, did the board not express reluctance at renewing this negotiating agreement until we had a purchase agreement with respect to the expansion water? Can you give us a little background on that, please?
Certainly. So in February of 22, this board authorized the general manager to start negotiations on this agreement once the water purchase agreement for Pure Water Monterey expansion was executed. So obviously that was a long time ago, and the water purchase agreement was not signed until earlier this year in the, I want to say, April timeframe. So nothing occurred until April. At that point, once we signed the agreement, we did start working with Cal-Am. There's been some staff changes at Cal-Am and a new attorney that has come on board. So hence the reason it's been taking this long. Plus it does, as you see before you, it got a little detailed in terms of effort.
So would you say we now have a perfected water purchase agreement with Cal-Am?
No. We have an executed water purchase agreement for Pure Water Monterey expansion. However, you know, I think you all know this. There was substantial delays at the CPUC to finally approve it. Once it was approved, it did not include some cost recovery. So Cal-Am didn't sign it. They worked with the CPUC on a resolution, and it was finally signed, like we said, in April. So there, based on those delays, the performance, where'd it go? The performance, the expansion delivery start date and the performance start date are old in the agreement that we have signed. And our current construction schedule, like Dave just talked about, we're going to get them going. We would not meet those dates, and we would effectively be in default of that agreement. We do have a draft amendment, the first amendment to the amended and restated water purchase agreement that has 2 new dates that we would meet, but that has not been executed as of right now.
Have there been any delays in getting that? Why has, I mean, this sounds like this is just sort of an administrative, these delays weren't our fault. I mean, we don't control the CPUC, we don't control Cal-Am. These delays were caused by other folks. Those other folks in the form of Cal-Am can simply sign an agreement. And what would you want for new dates?
So I'm going to say, and my time frame may be wrong. If they signed it in April, it was probably May, June timeframe. I was talking to Cal-Am and said, hey, let's just extend the dates by a year. That met the schedules that we were seeing from our consultants and the estimated completion dates. So instead of February 1st, 2025 for expansion delivery start date, it just shifts to February 1st, 26. And then instead of February 1st, 26 on the expansion performance date, we just shifted to 27. In the June timeframe, we did have discussions with Cal-Am and the Water Management District, since we're all parties to the water purchase agreement. And it was known an amendment was going to occur. As we got closer to having this agreement negotiated with Cal-Am, I did contact Cal-Am's president last week going, hey, where is that amendment? And from what I can tell, the same document that we had back in June did show up to Jim Gilpin's email today. So it's still out there.
But not signed or executed.
No, it is not signed or executed by any of us.
Well, I'd love to hear from my fellow board members on this. I'm real reluctant to proceed forward with an unperfected water purchase agreement that could very well put us in default with Cal-Am at some point in the future. Is there some rush or deadline in approving this exclusive negotiating agreement?
I'm going to volley back to you.
Well, look, yes and no, I would say. Cal-Am would probably tell you, yes, there is a rush. They're anticipating wanting to get third-party consultants going, et cetera. And we would not be, I guess, starting that process absent having a secure reimbursement agreement with them, which is part of this agreement. All of that work is lead time to what has to be completed to put us in a position to, if and when we get a negotiated outfall agreement lease, put us in a position to execute that. So, you know,
so Chris Cook with Cal-Am is actually on the attendee. So if we wanted to hear from him, we could certainly move him over. I will state that in my discussions with Chris, they want to move forward because they're trying to meet the conditions on the Coastal Commission CDP, the 22 conditions, and this is one of them. So they're trying to whittle their way through it. Also, as Jim mentioned, the amount of work that we need to do on the permitting side is fairly significant. It's not something we're going to get done in 6 months. It's going to take a while. In fact, based on the workload of staff, you'll note in attachment B that there's some costs in there for staff. It's likely we're going to have to hire someone to oversee this. So there's a number of steps. It's not a slam dunk.
Yeah, I would just add on the amendment relative to the deadlines. It's always been my impression, even before that agreement was signed by Cal-Am, that all the parties understood that the delay in the CPUC proceeding obviously pushed back the start of construction date and compressed those timelines, and that the parties were going to extend it. We prepared an amendment, and what I got this morning was labeled as their proposed amendment, but it's essentially the amendment I sent some time ago. So I don't anticipate, and I would love to hear from Cal-Am if it's otherwise, that they would intend to execute that immediately and get those dates amended. And then, of course, if they execute, M1W and the Water Management District will execute.
Vice President Williamson.
I kind of want to
Chair.
ask why we didn't correct the dates beforehand, but seeing how that's already passed, it seems a little bit moot at this point. But if I understand this correctly, we will default if an amendment isn't made to the expansion water purchase agreement. Is that, if we don't do this amendment, we will end up in default.
Yes.
And Cal-Am has the amendment. And how long have they had it for?
You know, I don't know exactly. I'm going to guess at least since June. Is that a fair statement? And we can certainly search our email files, but it's at least since June, maybe
we-
May.
And do we have, you stated that there's been a change in staff. Do we have an understanding of why there's been a delay on their part in just signing the amendment?
Well, I do know that they are very interested in getting this agreement done because it's conditional for their coastal commission permit. So I don't know if there's a nexus there or not. Just making sure that we're all moving forward together on it.
All right. I mean, I share same concern, but maybe we can discuss it more after public comment. And
Well, I'd certainly like to hear if any other directors, I've seen a few nods, but any other directors care to weigh in on Director Stefani?
So explain the default.
So in the water purchase agreement, there are these performance dates that we need to meet. And I'll give an example of the first phase of the project in the water purchase agreement. There were also these dates. In starting the project, we did not meet some of those performance dates, like getting so many acre feet in the ground at a time and so on. I received a letter from Cal-Am saying, you are now in default of your agreement. You did not meet a condition of it. Now, it was a letter, they didn't take any action of it. The way this is phrased, and I'll hopefully Jim can expand on it. If we don't get the amendment, we go into default by not meeting the date. Cal-Am could terminate the agreement. There's cause to terminate the agreement there. Is that a fair?
Yeah,
assessment?
essentially, Director Stefani, is the agreement included anticipated performance start dates that were based upon anticipated completion of construction. It's when you could become operational, when you would start groundwater injections, and those dates. And I guess to answer Director Williamson's question, at the time the agreement was negotiated, those timelines were put in based on the anticipated construction schedule, which would have started a year earlier had it not been for Cal-Am taking this to the CPUC's delay in that process, and then ultimately Cal-Am executing it in April of this year. So because of that delay, you know, the start times are going to be pushed back a year for delivery of water. So under the terms of the agreement, M1W and the Water Management District would be in default.
Great, I understand default, but Cal-Am wants something out of this too, right? They want an MPDES permit and they need our help. So if they need our help, I don't think they're gonna pull the strings on that amendment or on that default. I think they're gonna send you an amendment as quick as possible and get that straightened out.
Well, I
They
would
want something out of this deal too.
I guess.
I would hope that would be right, because there's no nexus between the two at all. One's not
Right.
tied to the other at all. And if it is held up, it's, I'll use the word hostage, you're holding one hostage
Hold
for the
everybody
other.
hostage.
And it can't happen that way anyway, because we got to go through a process of getting that other contract and negotiated and considered and approved.
Through the chair.
Vice Chair.
Yeah,
Williamson.
I have a few more questions. I mean, I guess that's part of my concern. I agree with you, Ron, that they want something out of this too, but if they had it since June, I don't understand why it's still sitting with them. And so I have two questions. One is, what happens if we default? And two, what was the and this is maybe more of a rhetorical question, but what was the essence of the board's direction to staff in regards to getting the water purchase agreement through the finish line before we move forward with this? So I know that we have this on the agenda today, and am willing to support as we had committed to when we had the conversation around the water purchase agreement. But if there's something that's preventing our ability to be able to move forward effectively, it gives me a little bit of pause. So I'm just wondering what the essence of it was. And to me, it was to have something that we can move forward with and not be in a precarious situation such as this.
I don't agree with the situation we're in. I think we're just fine. Let's negotiate. You'll get what you want. Cause they won't get what they want if we don't get what we want. It's, to me, it's pretty.
So,
So we're not trying to just delay this.
but to your point, Ron, though, I think that there needs to be, we need to ensure that we get
Let's put
the,
this on the line.
I think,
They don't commit to it right now.
but what I'm saying is we need to make sure that we can get the amendment signed so that we're not being held out on something. You're saying here today that they wouldn't, but I mean, unless it's signed, how can we trust that we're not going to move forward with the amendment?
Director Coletti.
Thank you, Chair. A question for Paul. This is a contract to conduct contract negotiations, right?
Yes.
So part of those negotiations, I imagine, will be the signing of an amended water purchase agreement, perhaps. Could that be part of a side letter, or is that something? And the other question is, does this doesn't compel us to actually budget for this either, right? I mean, we're not in the budget process of funding some of the staff, or you even mentioned we have to hire outside consultants to perform this work. So it's going to come back to the board anyway, right? To actually approve funding.
So no funding will come from M1W for the CalAm work. All the funding will come from CalAm making deposits. Certainly those contracts, if they're above my signing authority, would go before this board prior to execution.
So there will be some form of review, I guess, is
yes.
the process later. Okay.
Yes.
Well, I'm kind of with Ron. I think they're looking for some good faith effort here. And if it doesn't compel us to actually spend the money, then. But what about the point about actually getting some negotiated agreement on the amended water purchase agreement?
So in the agreement itself, it doesn't the agreement before us that we're talking about, it doesn't specify negotiating anything with water purchase agreement or anything like that. It is more focused on that future agreement and negotiating good faith. It's a somewhat generic term. So I guess I see them as separate, but this one is this, and I'm holding up the proposed amendment, is relatively simple. It's literally a page and a half. So,
Director Donaldson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I guess I'm having a difficult time finding the nexus between a potential default on a water purchase agreement and the matter that we have before us. And legal counsel seem to indicate there is none. Help me to find that connection.
Well, I think that the issue that people are perhaps concerned about or alluding to is that if CalAm doesn't sign the amendment, they could hold that amendment until we get an agreement with them over the outfall channel, is I think what I'm hearing. But what I'm saying is, look, the two aren't tied together. CalAm should simply just execute the amendment that we've all discussed over months and months and months, and they sent over this morning. So perhaps a simple solution to this is that we just condition this as we get the amendment and you authorize the GM to execute this outfall agreement, and that takes care of it all. You don't have to delay the decision. You just can condition it that way.
Yeah. And Scott, to the only nexus that from my perspective is going back to February 22, when the board gave me direction, go negotiate once you have an executed water purchase agreement. That's, in my opinion, the only nexus.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Other directors? All right, why don't we go out to the public then?
Okay, we will now hear from Melody Chrislock. Go ahead, Miss Chrislock.
Here we have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, actually,
I think she beat General Manager Tyson to the podium.
sorry, go ahead, Eric.
Thanks. Good afternoon, board members and everybody, staff. My comment, I'm Eric Tynan with the Castro Community Service District, I'm General Manager. We're looking at having an extraction from one of our wells, desalter. We may need capacity in that pipeline. I know Marina Coast, I believe, is talking about getting capacity. It sounds like right now you would want to get ahead of the ball by agreeing to negotiate, not to be stalling it or delaying it in any way. I mean, perfection is the enemy of progress. And Castroville may need that outfall. Marina Coast may need the outfall. If if Cal-Am is willing to pay for some of this upgrades, and it's all you're talking about tonight is an agreement to negotiate. You're not casting anything in stone. This is like a no-brainer. I just say, go ahead and do the agreement and let's move forward, all of us, because it's going to be more than just Marina Coast, more than just Castroville, more than just Cal-Am. It's all of us. So I'd strongly encourage you to approve the agreement to negotiate and go on to the next steps. Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Paul Bruno. I'm a resident of the district. I also serve on various boards and committees, including the Seaside Groundwater Basin Water Master and the Monterey Peninsula Taxpayers Association. And as a ratepayer, taxpayer, I encourage the efficient and beneficial use of public improvements. It's good for us to work together and find ways to use common things. We don't say this is my road, that's your road. That's not how we operate. So I look at the title of what's before us. It says negotiation, cooperation, and funding agreement. Negotiation and cooperation. The staff report mentions that the party should work cooperatively. And that's a great concept. I've been involved in water issues here for over 35 years. We often don't work cooperatively, but we should, and you have an opportunity to do that. So let's try to make this happen. Let's try to work cooperatively. I encourage you to let the general manager proceed. Thank you.
Okay, we will now hear from Melody Chrislock. Go ahead.
Melody Chrislock. So, I mean, the elephant in the room here is you're talking about a desal project that's not likely to ever be built because we're going to have enough water with the expansion. And the idea of cooperating with Cal-Am, well, gee, that sort of cuts both ways. Cal-Am has been the least cooperative corporation we've ever seen over the last 3 or 4 years. But the big issue here, I think, is moving forward on this agreement to negotiate now seems like a waste of your staff's time and a waste of Cal-Am ratepayer money. We're going to have to pay for all this, even though it's very unlikely this thing is ever going to get built. And Cal-Am's ownership of the system is going into court probably by the end of the year. This just seems completely premature to me. And I would certainly never sign it without them signing the water purchase agreement first. Given their history, that would be unwise. But it would also seem the most reasonable thing to wait until the CPUC goes into phase 2 and rules on whether this desal plan is even necessary. This is just the cart way before the horse. I really can't see why there's a rush to negotiate for a project that's not likely to be built, and the CPUC hasn't even authorized them to do it yet. So I hope you will consider the ratepayer money that's going to get spent, your staff time, and think twice about moving ahead on this until after the phase 2 hearings are completed. Thank you.
We will now hear from Susan Scavone. Go ahead, Ms. Scavone.
Thank you. Good evening, folks. I have to support what Melody Crislock said, especially when I hear that Cal-Am still has not perfected the water purchase agreement after all of this time that they've been given, and the additional $20 million that they extracted out of ratepayers to make the water purchase agreement even be signed by them so late in the game. And if they have any wiggle room legally in terms of default, I wouldn't trust Cal-Am. What if they pulled out of the water purchase agreement at the last minute, trying to pressure you to make sure that that desal plant is built? That is just their kind of game. And this board made the decision previously to hold them to that agreement before you would approve a negotiation about the outfall. There are other people trying to work with that outfall. I get that. But I also just want to reiterate that in addition to those extra $20 million, the ratepayers are going to bear the burden of all of the costs of this. Well, if we're in eminent domain and that is not built, then once again, we're paying for something that we didn't get. And that is all too much the history of Cal-Am in this area. So I would say that the board should wait. They should get in concrete, the water purchase agreement so that there isn't any risk of default and there isn't any risk of Cal-Am possibly pulling out of that agreement. It's crucial for the Pure Water Monterey expansion project. So I have to say that I think you should delay this decision until you get that agreement and you have everything written up. You can make the decision after that to just go ahead. It's not going to hurt much to wait another couple of months to agree to have a negotiations contract. Okay, thank you.
We will now hear from Lauren Latendry. Go ahead.
I'm the president of the Carmel River Watershed Conservancy, and we have long sought to increase the stream flows in the Carmel River to bring back the health of the river for the threatened species, which really includes humans that live along that river. And so we'd like to see the addition of the desal plant as a drought-proof way of avoiding, if we go into several years of drought, that could be really a problem in terms of having enough water to recycle. So we think that that recycling, aquifer storage and recovery, and a small desal plant are the 3 legs of the stool that we need. I would like to see the water purchase agreement signed as soon as possible, the amendment, and this negotiation agreement to negotiate. It's not, it doesn't cast you in concrete to just negotiate. So I'd like to see both of those approved and as soon as possible. Thank you very much.
And Mr. Cook did have his hand up, but now it's lowered. Did you want to speak, Mr. Cook? We will hear from Alvin Edwards. Go ahead, Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Board. Alvin Edwards, citizen of Seaside. We've been down this road before with these agreements. Let's get this one agreement done without conditions and without doing it until they signed it. Phase 2 been delayed over years, and they get to a certain point of doing things, and then they stop, and then they held us up. I heard the word hostage. I feel like we're going back into that again. Don't even condition this agreement. Just don't sign it until they do the water purchase agreement. The water purchase agreement been going on for over 2 years, probably more than that. I'm just giving you the benefit of the doubt. Don't sign this agreement until the water purchase agreement finally get completed. I know it's hard. I know you want to work with them. I want to work with them too, but Christ, come on. They need to get that done. They should have had that done, and they not. And they're not moving forward. So don't give them something else to move forward so they can go to another committee and say, oh, we got the signature, but it's on the condition. Just don't do it until the water purchase agreement finally get completed. So for God's sake, just don't do it. Just to make them happy. Make the community happy. Make your ratepayers happy. Make them wait until they get that signed. And if they really want this done, they'll have that agreement signed by next week, probably by Friday. Coming back, but I wouldn't agree to it right fast. So please, don't sign it. Let them wait until you get what we need. Your ratepayers, their ratepayers. Thank you for your time.
All right, I don't see any other hands, so we'll bring it
Sure.
back to the board.
Chair Moore,
Yes.
I think Chris Cook with Callum had his hand up, but we did move him over as a panelist just in
Okay,
case he
that's
also
fine.
had questions for him during your discussion.
Sure. Go ahead, Mr. Cook. Good, you're unmuted.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Chair and Board. Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate that we've been working with Mr. Shudo and others for several months now on this. I'd call it interim outfall agreement, and it's gone through a number of iterations, and we've had a number of meetings with agencies and others, and I think it's been a fairly collaborative experience along the way. As Mr. Shudo said, you know, there was changes in staff at various levels. I know our legal who amended the new dates on that water purchase agreement is a newer legal too, and was working on that based on input had from others. So I think we are working in good faith together on this process. We signed the initial water purchase agreement and have been working to collaborate and keep both projects moving forward through that process. And the one other item that I would reiterate that I believe members of the board and Mr. Shudo mentioned is, you know, this is essentially a agreement to allow us to reimburse for costs of, you know, modifying an outfall, starting, you know, permitting work that's needed for the project. But ultimately, we would have to come back to this board for a lease agreement, which is one of our requirements for the outfall. So this is something that's basically an agreement to negotiate in good faith, and as I see it, kind of an interim agreement to allow us to keep work on items that really are critical to keeping a project moving forward without you know, costs increasing too much or delays that could cost to ratepayers or other things. Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Cook from directors? Vice Chair Williamson.
Yeah. Hi, Chris. I'm just wondering, can you speak to why Cal-Am hasn't signed the amendment to the water purchase agreement?
I mean, in terms of that, I think, you know, I know we have recently, you know, just this last week, we're working on kind of getting the amendment put together with our new legal counsel, sending that over. I haven't heard any discussions internally of not signing it. I think lately our main focus has been on the agreement before you, trying to get that finalized, since there was quite a bit of back and forth with red lines on that. But I haven't heard any discussion to the counter of it. It was simply, you know, lately in terms of trying to have the draft there to be ready for review and proceed accordingly.
Thank you, Chris.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll bring it back to the board.
Seeing as, I know that M1W staff has worked kind of tirelessly along with CalAm on bringing forward the amendment, I'm happy to move the recommendation that staff is bringing forward. And I do think, Vice Chair Williamson's comment about being in default if we don't have the amendment in place, I think resonates well. And I do recognize that, there are a lot of, there's a lot of sensitivity around CalAm, and I understand that. Sorry, Mr. Cook, I can appreciate that, but as you can imagine, water is a big topic. So I would just move staff recommendation at this point. Thank you.
Is there a second?
Carbone, second.
You?
On the motion?
Yes. Vice Chair Williamson?
I'm actually, would you be willing to accept a friendly amendment that would make the negotiations contingent on the amended water purchase agreement signed by both organizations?
No, I think those are two separate things, but thank you. I appreciate the offer.
Okay, well, maybe I could try to make
Well, you can try the Robert's rules, you can try substitute motion.
that's where I was going for. I couldn't think of the right terminology. So I'd like to try to make a substitute motion, which is essentially the same thing, but contingent on the amendment to the agreement being signed.
Is there a second? I'll second that just to see where we're at.
I think if I could speak to that for a second.
Yes.
I think we could have moved forward with this over a year ago, when CalAm originally brought this to us. But as Paul indicated, this board decided that we wanted to wait until the expansion was done and through before that. And so we've gotten through that, but my concern is that we're putting our agency in a precarious situation. And let's see how the vote goes tonight, but I'd hate to say I told you so later on when CalAm for some reason decides to hold it up because of something that maybe hasn't been completely obvious to us tonight. I think we have a responsibility to our ratepayers. I'm not sure. I had asked this question earlier, and you may have answered this, but I can't remember what the response was if you did. What are the implications if we default?
If we default, CalAm could, they don't have to, but could terminate the amended water purchase agreement.
Okay.
That is an event of default. The event of default is a terminable.
Okay. And we're looking at a document that's less than 2 pages. I don't see why CalAm couldn't, if it's so urgent to move forward, which I don't want to hold it up. I don't want to hold up the negotiations of this. I want to act in good faith. But I don't want to put our agency in a precarious situation when that was the intent of this board's direction to staff, to hold that until things were completed with the expansion. So I just want to make sure that we finish it. They could sign it and send it to us tomorrow or by the end of the week. I don't understand what the concern is of having that expectation to ensure that we're protecting the ratepayers.
Can I ask through the chair?
Please.
Just a legal question. Can you have an agreement contingent upon another I mean, isn't that quid pro quo a bit, like in the context of we're not gonna sign this agreement until you sign another? I mean, they're two separate issues.
Well, I think they're separate, but I think what the issue is, they've presented us with an amendment this morning. So the question would be, per this motion, you're authorizing the general manager to execute. You're just putting this motion would be putting a condition precedent on it that if you get their signed amendment, then Paul could execute this proposed negotiation agreement. So there's nothing illegal about that.
Mr. Chair.
Director Stefani.
I got full confidence in our general manager that he's not going to negotiate a bad deal for us. And so through this negotiation, he'll get that amendment done. We've got, I was adding it up, at least $64 million already invested in the expansion. So, and loans and on the hook for, so we've got to have the amendment. And I got full confidence that Paul will make that a priority.
To the chair. It's,
Correct. Vice Chair Williams.
I
Yes,
just
go
don't-
ahead.
I don't see this being a problem of Paul's though. I mean, I think Paul's done to what I can see, Paul's done everything that he can. It's been, the amendment has been sent to Cal-Am. And has there been follow-up with Cal-Am in regards to the amendment?
On Friday, I did contact their president, asking where it was, where we're at, and that's when it was sent to Jim through the new legal counsel today, actually. And actually, I'm looking at my email. I'm hoping it just drops in because then we can stop this discussion, but it hasn't yet. So there has been, there have not been much discussion on the amendment since we established those dates months ago, until I did contact Kevin last week.
So back in June, you had discussions about this.
Yeah.
With Cal-Am.
On or about, yes.
And they may have had a different council at that point in time,
They may have.
but there were no interim communications with them, or they didn't, was the ball in their court? Was the ball in our court? Where was the ball last June?
I certainly felt it was in their court because we were the ones requesting the change.
And we'd made
and if
the
they agreed
request.
to it, obviously we would like that. So,
Okay. All right.
Call for the question, please.
Any other debate? Well, okay, call for the question. There's a second, or we can just go to vote.
Well, let's maybe,
Okay, I'm not hearing a second, but we can, do we have to have a second? Oh, for a call for the question requires a second. But I didn't hear a second. Did you have something else, Vice Chair Williamson?
no, I was looking at Church. I thought it looked like he,
But you know, it's.
Go ahead, Director Church.
Yeah.
Please, weigh in.
Well, yeah.
I know it's.
I'm trying to weigh Andy on this one. This is it's kind of a hard thing to weigh here in some ways, because we're just talking about negotiation. We're not talking about making a deal. Let's be clear on that. We have this other that isn't signed, and what we're talking about here is a negotiations for 2 years. This is what we're talking about. Is that correct?
Yes.
Essentially
2 year.
2 years.
yes.
Yeah. So I'm trying to, and I know there's some concerns about Cal-Am and, whether they're interested. I mean, I think this, Director Stefani said, that they have an interest in this as well. I'm just kind of wondering, we go ahead, we're talking about a negotiation for over 2 years. You're not going to come back next meeting with a deal on this, I don't think. And so I'm kind of, thinking, let's, approve this, but let's look at this in 3 months and see where we're at on the red, let's see if Cal-Am is moving ahead with this agreement and all.
so can I ask for a clarification there?
Yes, please.
So are you saying that we'll allow staff to move forward and then have it come back to the board in 3 months and we can make a determination at that time if we want staff to continue moving forward? with the
Well, it
negotiations?
gives us a chance to kind of there's some concern here about why Cal-Am's lagging. I think, it's going to be settled by then, or it's not going to be settled. If it's not settled, we got a problem.
But that's kind of why my motion is the way that it is, right? Like, if there's no issue, then we should just sign it. But if there's an issue, then let's be honest about that with our partners so that we're not going down a road and wasting everybody's time on a negotiation that.
And I'm saying, let's kind of keep both things moving ahead. That's what I'm trying to suggest, but let's bring back. So I mean, basically, I'm just saying, let's not put a vote on this. Let's sit out there for 2 years. Let's hear what's happening in a few months.
So would you be comfortable if I made a change to my how do you call it?
Substitute.
Substitute,
motion.
where we have it
substitute.
come back to the board in 3 months to assess where where we're at with the amendment.
I think we need to hear from either council or our general manager on that suggestion.
Look, the way this is set now, you can't do that. We would have to amend this agreement because we're agreeing to negotiate with them for a 2-year period. And during that 2-year period, we're agreeing to cooperate to pursue permits and lease amendments, et cetera. So the way it's written doesn't provide itself for this timeline. I would say, if you can indulge, they've sent the amendment over this morning. So if, my suggestion earlier was, we'll just make it, if they give us the agreement signed, the amendment, then Paul can sign this and we're done and we're moving forward.
So go ahead.
And actually, I would like to clarify as well, because my understanding of the motion is if this amendment shows up in my inbox signed by their president tomorrow, I can sign the agreement and we're good to go. That's what I thought the substitute
Yes.
motion was. And that seems reasonable because Chris and I spent an hour on the phone with the regional board today and trying to understand the amount of work that is going to be required to complete everything for Cal-Am to get that permit request in. And it's a lot. So, I hate to say this out in public, but I agree with Jim that the less complexity, the better on something like this. I wouldn't expect it at the end of the week. I do expect it tomorrow, the amendment. I would, particularly with a condition like that. Because you're right, Ron, they're motivated to get this done. They have other things in the fire. So.
Yeah, and I would say if they don't sign an amendment that they sent over this morning within a reasonable period of time, a week, well, then there's something else going on. And the strange county, but I don't know.
I could just make one last comment.
Vice Chair Williamson.
So I don't know where it's going to go. I have a sense, but I can't support the original motion, and it isn't because I'm trying to not act in good faith or be a partner with Cal-Am. I'm totally 100% wanting to play ball here and allow what we've committed to last year when we had this delayed as a board in the first place, move forward. And I think if there's something legitimate that would cause us to not want to move forward with Cal-Am, to not want to move forward with it, I think it's a good thing for this board to be aware of what the implications are of that as we're going into this negotiation. So for that reason, I can't support the original motion, but I just want to make sure it's clear that it's not because I don't want to move forward with this. It's just to make sure that we're keeping to the promise that we all made originally when we agreed to this last year.
So I do have to agree with Vice Chair Williamson's comments. I think we have a duty to protect our ratepayers. If Cal-Am previously hadn't sent us letters of default on earlier agreements, I might be much more willing to just go ahead and approve this, but we've really got to get this amendment taken care of, or we're looking at a potential future default, which I know Director Stefani is confident that we still hold, I don't know, a big stick or something, but I'm sorry, my past experience with Cal-Am and some of their attorneys does not give me a lot of confidence. Sorry, Mr. Cook. So I'm afraid I'm with Director Williamson, but it looks like we want to vote on this. Probably ought to do a roll call because doing a voice vote might get a little confusing. So if we could have a roll call, please.
And it's on the substitute motion.
It's on the substitute motion first. That is correct.
Okay, Veranda,
No.
Castroville,
No.
County of Monterey,
Yes.
Delray Oaks,
Yes.
Marina Coast,
Yes.
Monterey,
Yes.
Pacific Grove,
Yes.
Salinas,
No.
Sand City,
No.
motion carries 5 yes, 4 no's, and 1 absent.
Thank you very much. We move on to agenda item 10C. Staff report, please.
Thank you, Chair Moore. So, as you know, we've been talking about our weighted vote procedure that's identified within our joint powers agreement. We have had a couple of projects and planning meetings, and at the last projects and planning meeting, and please interrupt me if I'm getting this wrong, there were 3 options provided, and what the committee voted on unanimously was to bring option B forward for consideration and discussion at the board. Member Habino did ask for some additional information regarding, it's not the way you phrased it, but what the founding fathers were thinking. Like, what was the weighted vote at the beginning, or as entities came on back in 1979 and 1989 and so on. So that is reflected in the staff report. There's, I think, attachment 2 that shows in 1979 and 1987 what the weighted votes were and what the percentages of the total weighted votes are. Option B, which is what the committee voted on, it tries to address the weighted vote formula in 2 ways. One, at the lower level, to be more granular, instead of 1 vote for 0 to 10,000, it's 1 vote 0 to 5,000, because we have 4 of our member entities that have less than 2,000 population. So it was sort of a large jump there. It also tries to address on the upper end, the city of Salinas, that is far beyond, at 163,000 population right now, the 100,000 break that was established back in the 70s. I know there was healthy discussion at the committee level. I don't know if we want to get into that at all on some of the pros and cons of the various options. And that's all I have, unless someone from one of the committees would like to speak, or I can answer questions if you'd like.
Directors, questions for staff? Director Craig.
Hi. Not that I haven't been in meetings for 12 hours already today, and I'm dealing with the biggest issue in terms of the city of Salinas at the very end of the day. I would just share with you, so I can appreciate the discussion, and I'm grateful for the discussion, and certainly Paul's efforts in bringing forward different options. You know, we started out the conversation with, hey, we're not super thrilled about the fact that, you know, there's 65,000 people who essentially are not represented in our voting structure. And I appreciate coming forward with different options. I would share with you that the presented option B creates no change in the percentage of weighted vote that the city of Salinas has, even if we explode to 300,000 people, like over a period of time. I want to be clear that I'm grateful for, you know, personnel and planning to come and to provide a unanimous decision, but I would ask that we take a look again at other options. When I spoke, interestingly, you know, and I actually really found the attachment for where we were in 1979 versus where we were in 1987 versus where we were in 2022. So our forefathers had certain intent. However, we've since added 3 member entities, which has diluted that population representation for the city of Salinas over the last 40 years. You know, if you look at pulling out Baranda and Castroville and Marina, our percentage representation would be higher in that capacity. But I would just share with you that I think what's being presented today is not particularly what we were looking to accomplish. in terms of representation for Salinas. We're, 48, I think, 59% of the population of this agency. And I'm looking to increase the representation in terms of votes in that capacity. When you double up on the votes on the other end of our member entities, it still dilutes the voting population of the city of Salinas. Now, I recognize I'm talking to the people who, I can very much appreciate Luke and the city of Pacific. I will be at the butterfly parade, right? I love you. I love Pacific Grove. But Pacific Grove has 40% of the voting power that Salinas does, and we're 10 times the size. So I would ask that this board consider perhaps having a subcommittee outside of planning and personnel to have Salinas at the table. I don't want 58% of the vote. I don't want that, but I am looking for a better combination. And I think tasking staff to come up with options without having a conversation about what our needs are, I think is where the disconnect is. I think that's where the disconnect was in 2020. You're close here, you're absolutely close. I'm not asking for we want all, I'm not here to take all my toys and go home. I'm trying to identify an opportunity to have a better structure in place where we can compromise. I don't know what that subcommittee looks like, but I would like Salinas at the table so that what is presented is more greatly accepted. And I don't know if I know that there's a concern about the weighted vote, right? So I have 6 votes, but maybe 4 1-vote entities and the 6 voter, so that the total 22 votes, you have 10, weighing in and 5 participate. I don't know what that looks like, but I just needed to get that off my chest before we start the robust discussion. I was incredibly excited and also disappointed at what was being presented. And I know it's an uncomfortable conversation. I'm grateful for the discussion and the willingness to even address it. But it's not quite the right formula that we're seeking. Thank you.
Other directors, Director Church?
So I agree. This whole thing needs to be really reworked out. And there's a city of Salinas is underrepresented. A lot of other cities are going to be growing, need to have room for space into here. The thing is, we've all got to come to a unanimous decision on this, or we do nothing. And doing nothing is what's been going on for 40-some years, and that isn't going to work anymore. So there has to be something done into here where we're looking, beyond everybody's own silo. And I know the city of Salinas didn't have a vote on a committee meeting, but you could have attended and spoken out and expressed things. No, you couldn't.
That would have broken a Brown Act, right?
What did it broken Brown Act? What did we do? What did it put us over?
Could you have been
couldn't have participated in your deliberation. I mean, she
could not be there to comment.
She could be there to comment as a member of the public. Yeah,
that's my point.
Right.
I mean, I think you can comment in public, so it doesn't. If you're not sitting there, you're not breaking the Brown Act. That would have been good to have the input into there. Looking at this, so asking the big question then, what kind of percentage do you feel City of Salinas needs?
I mean, if you talk to the City of Salinas staff, they want 40 to 45%. I would tell you, I don't think that's realistic, and I want to be open to compromise. And so I'm thinking somewhere between where we're at 27 and where the high end of 40, and somewhere in between, I think we could land. I don't know what that number looks like, and I'm not here to crunch numbers today. I think that's probably why I offered up a subcommittee. I want to make sure that I get that we need unanimity with it.
So let me ask sorry if I'm,
please.
if I may, yeah, jump on in here. The way the votes matter in subcommittees or committees?
I'll have to confess, I don't know. I believe they Well, the committees don't vote. Well, you can make vote recommendation. I don't know. I think they do technically under your JPA agreement.
I think they would matter, but it is always from a committee perspective, just recommending to the board.
Yeah,
And since I've been here, there has not been a call for weighted votes at a committee.
Excuse me, but is it true, however, that when we have crafted committee appointments, even though they come out of the chair, historically staff has assisted the chair in ensuring that no committee contains a weighted vote majority of the overall board?
Absolutely. And that's part of the,
'Cause of
you
the
all
Brown
put
Act.
in your preferences, but you don't always get
Brown
them because of the Brown Act. You're right.
Right. And would, if Salinas would in fact get this increase, would that not mean that any committee that Salinas was on potentially could have only one other committee member from the rest of the board?
I guess
Depending on
what the
what the
formula
percentage
is.
I mean, the
depends on
formula that would be whatever the formula ends up being.
But it would dictate likely a reduction in the number of other committee members on any committee that Salinas participated in. Is that?
Actually, through the chair, I think it would be a reduction in Salinas's representation on those subcommittees. I think staff would probably want to seek greater representation from the member entities versus one entity with a larger amount of votes.
To the chair.
Vice Chair Williamson.
Um,
Go ahead.
Though it is the board that decides, and I agree. I think generally speaking, I think that's the goal is to make sure that we do have representation from the board, because it's like Paul said, it's just recommendations. We're not actually making changes. But just to clarify, it is something that the board is ultimately approving, even though staff is trying to work the numbers in the background. And while I'm here, I think part of my concern, I'm open to looking at something, and I feel that how option B was recommended by the committee is probably a way of getting to anything, if anything at all, because part of my concern is I don't see how we get unanimous support from all the agencies making any change, period, never mind making something that's kind of, something maybe a little bit more palatable to folks. So, and then part of my concern is there's a lot going on that we're putting on staff. And so I want to be careful not to throw another thing on there if in the end we're going to result in nothing moving forward. And again, I'm open to it. I want to entertain that. So how do we get there? But if we're creating another committee, and I just get a little bit worried about capacity. So I almost kind of want to do a litmus test to kind of see where everybody feels that their agency is, to see, right? Because I'm really careful of what the workload of staff is right now.
And if I may respond through the chair, if that's okay.
Please, go ahead.
So I agree with you. Like, I was like, okay, we got 5 unanimous votes towards option B. And I talked with my staff and said, can you come up with like a twist to option B, alternate, alternate option B 2023? Because we also like option B from 2020, but that went down in a pile of flames back in 2020, right? So my staff crunched numbers. I mean, this was a big discussion that we had internally. They came up with an alternate option, but I'm not prepared. I mean, I have it, but I'm not prepared to like pop quiz everybody on the dais with it, which is why my intent was to not necessarily put the onus on staff, but really perhaps come forward with some potential options or solutions to be able to like say, hey, here's what we're bringing to the table. I'm not here to just poo-poo everything and say no, but I do think that needs to have, I do think part of the conversation needs to include Salinas so that we can feel like what we're requesting is being, is being addressed.
So, sure. So I think Salinas is, concerns are, there's real validity here. And, I'll throw another, little twist to this then, and I understand you want to hold back and I don't know what your twist is, but, and that would be, to look, we have this, as we break this down, it goes after we get up to basically 25,000, it goes to 25,000 increments up to 100,000.
What option are you looking at?
Page 116 and 137.
Which option?
Option B.
I'm looking, no, I'm not looking at any option. I'm looking at the populations here.
Oh, population.
The population run down. We are looking at option B. So yes, I guess we would be looking at option B that way. And I'm going to make an amendment off of that. But I'm just looking at the populations, the way they break down. What I'm going to throw out here as a possibility is that we continue that 25,000 break between 100 to 200. So it'd be at 100 to 25, 125 to 150, 150 to 175, and 175 to 200, and then go in 50,000 implements. That would give 2 more votes for the city of Salinas. That means you would have, there would be, I think it's 2 more, right? One,
I think it's 3.
3. I mean, let me see, would be, yeah, I thought maybe I did count. Well, anyway, whether it's 2 or 3, it would be 10 or 11 of 31 or 32 votes, which means that Salinas would be about a third at that point. So you've increased it up some. It isn't going to be 40 or 45. And, I want to throw that out there as something for just around a bit of discussion. And yet, and keeping it down so as other cities have some room to grow too, because particularly Marina, I think, has a lot of potential for growth.
Thank you, Director Church. I wonder if I might, however, get a clarification out of staff. We have a lot of members of the public still on listening to this item. So whatever modification to the joint powers agreement is proposed, whether it's fixing a typo or changing these cut points, first of all, that would require a majority vote of this board to begin with, which could be done by weighted vote. Is that correct?
Yes, weighted or just straight vote.
Weighted or
majority.
unweighted, but it would require a majority from this board.
Yes.
But the action wouldn't be to approve the change in the JPA. The action would be to send the proposed change to the JPA to all of our member councils and boards. Is that correct?
I believe so.
And then each of those councils and boards would have to, no pun intended, be on board.
They'd have to agree to the change.
A majority of each of those would have to agree to the change.
Each entity would have to agree to the change, and a majority of each entity, presumably, I don't know what their standards are for approving it, but.
Right. It would be strictly up, for instance, Pacific Grove City Council would have to have a majority vote saying, yes, we agree to this change to the JPA agreement. The same would go for Delray Oaks and the city of Salinas and Marina Coast Water District and the city of Monterey and so forth. I just want to make sure that everybody's aware of. So every council or board representing a member agency of this JPA effectively has veto power over any change whatsoever in the JPA. Is that pretty much legally correct?
Yes.
Yes, I mean,
Okay.
the agreement requires unanimity, so.
I just want to make sure that's out on the table, and, obviously the public's listening in here, and it's a little bit of an esoteric sort of voting situation. Director Craig.
And thank you. And I appreciate that. That was the intent from bringing it up from day one, right? Like I understand it's way more complicated than just, the 9 of us deciding on how we move forward. But I do think it warrants a greater conversation. I also can appreciate and thank staff for bringing something forward immediately. I know that the initial conversation was centered around getting it done this year. I would like to still aim for that, but I do think creating, like, pulling it out of personnel and planning, am I saying it wrong? Projects and planning. Thank you. I I do think pulling it out so that projects and planning can continue down the path of handling the policies that are coming forward first and creating a separate subcommittee on that, just, I think, warrants that extra attention so that whatever comes forward, there's greater compromise and collaboration on what comes forward to this board.
Thank you. Director Hibinu.
Thank you, Chair. You know, during that projects and planning committee meeting, I suggested, hey, let's look at in the past and see how the populations lined up with percentages of voting. And, you know, compared to 1979, you know, this option B that we just put forward is we've already gone down by 5,000 in the first three categories. 5, 5, and then 15 for the 3 vote category, which was 25 to 49,000. And option B was 15 to 25,000. So the only thing that kind of bothers me is that when you get to past 100,000, it jumps all the way to 50,000. I just didn't think that was very fair once I started looking at it. I think that if these guys were to be looking at it, this is how they designed it. I think it would be fair for 25,000 to carry on. That's not a bad point. What Glenn brought up, of, you know, making that jump once you hit 200. But I think, you know, over these next, you know, several decades, I think that's probably pretty fair to keep going how it was written. And the other thing that I wanted to just quickly comment on is that, you know, I just wanted to kind of take a step back and try to be neutral about it and just look at some of the things that really, the 2 things I think are really critical to our organization, this GPA, and that's revenue and daily flow. Revenue, Salinas is 48%, and its daily flow is 54%. If you were to look at all the revenue and daily flow of each entity and go across the line to its voting, with the exception of Monterey having 18% of revenue and 13% of weighted vote, Salinas is at, you know, 48% of revenue and, you know, that 27% of weighted vote. It's just such a huge percentage difference that I don't know. I just think that, you know, definitely looking at these numbers in terms of, you know, the 2 things that we need are just revenues and volume. So I think it just slants in terms of good faith, collaboration. I think it deserves a little more recognition. Thank you.
Other comments, questions?
Just to add in,
Yes, Director Church.
as I looked at this with what I was suggesting and what Kent's, you know, pretty much suggesting, Salinas would get 1 extra vote right now. And then when the development north of Creek Bridge adds another 10,000, 12, 15,000 people, it's going to be another vote there. And then there would still be, if there's more growth going to 200, there would be a 3rd one added. So, you know, there's a potential there for growth that is reasonable. And even if you add in all those 3, as I say, you're still only about 33% of the vote. The other areas that potentially could grow, Marina, Seaside, Castroville, I think those are the only other ones.
So I don't know whether this is a question for staff or Director Church in the committee, but suppose we came up with an option D that had Salinas at 40%. Was that sort of the high end, I believe, of Director Craig's concern? And you'll note in the 2045 AMBAG forecast, it says Marina Coast Water District might hit 60,000 plus, depending on what growth occurs on the former Fort Ord. So let's say that at the point in time when Salinas had 40% of the vote, Marina Coast Water District had 11%. What would be the implications of that on a weighted vote?
Two of you would have a majority.
The two of us could get together
do
and have
math
a
real quick?
majority
That's
and
You
control
couldn't
this
talk anymore.
organization.
and
Two of us could not be on a committee together. I just.
I would, sorry, I apologize.
Yes,
This is
no,
not
please, go ahead,
dialogue, and
Director Craig.
I am passionate about it.
We understand.
Salinas handles this same issue on other entities, right? So Salinas Valley Solid Waste Authority, like we're 63% of that member agency. We are 63% of the Salinas Valley Solid Waste Authority. TAMSI, we have a weighted vote on TAMSI. I would share with you that I think there are some solutions here. I don't necessarily want to take up an entire board meeting with a whole bunch of what ifs. I'd like to sit down with staff, with my staff, with anybody else that and to crunch some numbers for an option D. I'm totally open to Supervisor Church's option. Board member Hibino, sorry, it's late. I'm having a hard time. Am I on a board, a trustee? What's going on? But just to just open the dialogue about it and try to figure out what might make sense. I'm not here to strong arm or be the big giant gorilla, but I do want to have that conversation. The long-term agreement is in play, and I want to be able to turn to my representatives, for the city of Salinas to be able to say, listen, we're working as best we can, but the city has grown substantially since 1979 and the percentage has not. And so, and that's been for a myriad of reasons, right? We have 3 more member entities, it's just how it's structured. So I'd like to have the conversation now about it versus continuing the food fight down as the city continues to grow. So that's where I'm at. And I'd entertain a subcommittee. I'd entertain, if you want to crack out numbers now, we can do that. But I also recognize it's 7:30 and nobody's really prepared to do that. So
If I may, again, here on.
Director Church, go ahead.
And I'm hesitant to pull off to another committee because we get people together, we're looking at these numbers and we bring it back and then the rest of the board is wondering, wait, how did you get here and what's going on? I think in some ways it's healthy for us as one group to go over this because we've already laid out the basic stuff. I don't know, Paul, you're nodding your head either in agreement or you're laughing. I mean, one or the other, but that's okay.
in agreement. And I wanted to add to what your statement and when you're done.
No, I
please.
feel this much, but I would, suggest that, I threw out an option here, which, you and Ken had some expression of support on, but I'm also thinking maybe what we should do is table this till the next meeting. And maybe we need to take a look at what Los Angeles County, how they deal with this, because I got a good hunch they have a problem like this because they got one big city in there. Have we looked into that? And what do they do?
Well, we actually looked at a number of entities down there. The one that comes to mind is Metropolitan Water District. So the largest water organization in the country. And they do theirs based on assessed value. It's not a weighted vote. They actually bring in extra people. So hypothetically, in our case, Salinas would have 6 people sitting here. And hence the reason their board is 36 people plus or minus. There's a number of options out there. Ken,
yes,
may I add to Supervisor Church's comment? So, back in 2020, we did create an ad hoc committee for this, and we sort of see how that ran. Now we tried with an existing committee. Maybe if the board is open to it, a facilitated discussion with the entire board might be helpful since you all have skin in the game and everyone needs to vote yes. That's where I've been ruminating, and I know I've been upsetting everyone equally because how do you get to yes with all of you? And so maybe, I know it's hard to set aside time, but having a facilitated discussion with all of you since you all need to get to yes. Might be an option. Just want to throw that
Like
out.
a workshop or?
Yeah.
Vice Chair Williamson.
And yes, I use the term facilitated versus mediated.
I had thrown to Paul the concept of mediation, because you're talking about an agreement amendment where all of you have got to come to an agreement. And if each of the entities had a representative at the mediation to express their positions, et cetera, and if that facilitator could get the group to a consensus on a equitable, agreeable outcome, that would seem to be, to me, the only way out of the woods with this unanimity thing.
I'm not
Director
so
George.
sure that's going to work
Yeah,
as well, because,
Holster your
you know, it's not
weapons.
just us making a decision. It's, you know, you go back to your city council,
Right.
you know, you go back to your agencies and, you know, we could have one person here that sort of feels that, well, I'm going to be part of the group and agree to it, and then go back and then be the lone wolf there. So I'm not sure. This isn't like a property disagreement where we have to sit down on two sides, or a marriage that's breaking up. This is a real political decision here. And I'm just not sure mediation would work, but that's just my view on it.
I'm open to facilitation. I think that, I mean, a facilitated workshop where we're like literally somebody's out cracking numbers, you know, and we're trying to get to the middle ground. I think that's probably a healthy place to, I don't want to say start because we've started twice, but I mean, to continue the discussion.
Vice Chair Williamson.
Yeah, so I think before this conversation went the direction it did after I originally requested to speak, I mean, my thought, and maybe just to kind of reiterate what I was sharing earlier, part of me doesn't want to get in the way of giving Salinas the opportunity to state its case and give it its true, fair chance at trying to address this. Like I want that to happen, and I think that I can support something that allows some kind of change to the makeup of the JPA, the weighted vote structure. On the other side, I want to be mindful of the fact that we need unanimous support from this entire board, and all of our agencies have to approve it. So that's kind of why I was just asking, like, it might be helpful to just do a litmus test. I don't want to stop this before it goes too far down, but I also want to be mindful of our resources and not taking too much capacity if this is a futile exercise. So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Well, how about having a straw
To the
vote?
discussion of changing the weighted vote as the opening dialogue.
Yeah, because part of my concern is that we do some kind of facilitate, whatever, or we create another subcommittee, whatever, we put more energy and capacity into this, and we go further down the road of like hoping that we might actually end up with something. And then if we end up voting no at that time, my concern is that there's going to be more tension that exists, as opposed to maybe just stop being this sooner. And that's not what I'm advocating for. I just want to be clear, but I like, either way, there might be some frustration if it's a no, either at now or later, right? So I guess I just kind of wanted it is helpful, I think, for just us to be honest with ourselves and see.
Well, you could ask for the following question, although I don't know whether
How about a straw vote? I just to kind of get a general idea, I threw out the idea of going 25,000 increments up to 200. You know, maybe we can just, we don't need a motion for this, I don't think, unless nobody wants to do it. But if we could just maybe call out kind of a straw vote, just kind of see if there's any support, at least going in some direction of what we're doing, or where we're at, I think would be helpful. I think this is the problem. We're just talking right now about ideas, and this maybe fits, this maybe doesn't fit, but we don't know where the direction of this board wants to go. We can vote on B, or we can vote on something, not as an actual vote up and down, but just to get a gist of what's going on informally.
Director Coletti.
I think this is a bad arrangement to begin with, and I don't think we're going to make it better. And I think the only real position that I see Pacific Grove embracing is the status quo. And I'm sure that sounds unfortunate to some, but I think that's the reality.
Well, as to Vice Chair Williamson's proposal that we have a straw vote, I was going to suggest for those directors who are willing to say so, the question would be, do you think you could induce your respective council or board to approve a change? And if so, would it be a change where you lost influence, lost voting
Or
power?
gained.
Well, I mean, you could answer the question either way. You could say, my board would have certainly support a gain in our influence over this board, but my board absolutely would not support a loss. So just put you all on the, you can answer the question or not as you choose, but I'll be happy to go around the room unless you want me to shut up. Director Donaldson.
Yeah, I think the big discussion needs to be held amongst the jurisdictions that's are potentially going to have a change, either up or down. And as I see it, most of them are up. And so that's Monterey, Salinas, Seaside, Marina Coast. I mean, really, your agencies stand to either benefit or not from a change in the weighted vote. I mean, I'm a 1%er any way you put it. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's not going to change. So I think that's where the greater discussion needs to be amongst those agencies who are going to be impacted, to see if we can even get to a unanimous type stance on this.
Chair. Vice Chair Williamson.
I think I see where you're going with that. I think the challenge is that's basing it off of right now. If we were to implement, let's say, option B, that would be for now. But if there was growth, which assumedly there will be in Salinas, that I imagine impacts those one voter agencies more so. So in a way, your weighted vote will diminish, if that makes sense, right? Like as a percentage of the total. So in that case, everybody's, I think, impacted because everybody's vote is going to change up or down at some point as growth happens.
Yeah, in every option,
everybody's
the folks, yeah, we're diminished. Sand City, Delray Oaks, Baranda, they all fall in the same category. So regardless of which option's out there, the voting power is diminished amongst those agencies.
So
it's across the board for us.
Yeah, just to be clear, Director Donaldson, although you are currently a one vote, that one vote is 4.55% of the total voting power of this board. Option B, you drop to
1.2
to 3.45
out of 3.45. So you're not a 1%er. I'm trying to say.
However,
At least a 4%er.
So if I may, though, this is a discussion about gain and loss, right? So if Delray Oaks all of a sudden decides to build a high rise in Delray Oaks, they gain percentage points as they grow in population. Now, can Delray Oaks do that realistically? Probably not, but Marina certainly can. So the conversation, like Salinas has diminished its voting. You talk about the reduction of percentages, like I'm there, like that's why I'm here having the conversation. I'd love to hear from Mr. Coletti about why you want to keep status quo, like why you're not open to discussion about any level of changing a weighted vote.
Because I think, through the chair,
please, Director Coletti.
Because I think the conversation's missing the real point, and that's how the system's actually constructed. I visualize the system as a bucket brigade. Pacific Grove hands it off to Monterey, Monterey hands it off to Seaside, et cetera, et cetera. Take one agency out of that loop, the bucket brigade breaks down. So we're all equal in the system context. And that's why I think this quite frankly, I think this weighted vote is a manipulation of the system. That's just my opinion. And I don't know why it got created. It did. I guess it's a creature of the legislature, perhaps, or the JPI. Maybe Paul can give us some historical context.
So it was actually in the formation of the Joint Powers Agreement, and Rob Wellington was the attorney at the time. He was sitting down with those founding fathers, if you will, or mothers, and came up with this. It is referenced in the health code of the legislature for Monterey Monterey Regional County Sanitation District,
right?
But it's what makes us all go back to our respective boards to get it approved is within the Joint Powers Agreement itself.
Right. So we're referencing something that was created.
Yeah,
Okay.
but that it does go back to our attorney at the time and the people sitting here at the time.
I guess if we're going to spend time on this, and it sounds like we are, maybe we should consider going to our respective agencies and ask if we're just willing to get rid of this weighted vote system. Maybe there's, that's another conversation. But that's the reason, because I see it all fitting together, and you can't, even the 1%er is contributing just as much if you're looking at that bucket brigade analogy. So that's where I come from.
Through the chair, then, if
Director Craig.
thank you. So Director Coletti, I would just acknowledge, so I understand where you're coming from on that. And I'm trying to be a team player here, right? In the context of, like, we're all up here trying to make good policy, but there's a realization that the city of Salinas continues to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And the revenue that is provided for this agency is primarily coming from Salinas. I'm not here to throw down my weight, but I also want to have the open discussion, and I would hope that each director would be open to the discussion of trying to figure out what might be more equitable. I got a hell of a lot of people in the city of Salinas, a hell of a lot. And I have to be able to represent them and make good decisions on a stronger weighted vote on this particular entity. And so I'm not asking you to vote yes on whatever's getting thrown out there, but I'm asking you to be open to the discussion about changing up the weighted vote.
Yeah, I was about to say, we haven't, unless there's Director.
Yeah, I just
Director
had a
Donaldson.
question. It's kind of, it relates to what Director Craig was saying about, let's say Delray Oaks builds something out at the former Fort Ord. We're supplied by Marina Coast. Do those numbers go to me or do they go to him?
Great question. We're looking at the wastewater infrastructure. So the water can come from Marina Coast, but if you have the wastewater infrastructure that is contributing, the population would go to you. So it's depending on how you've annexed all that stuff.
Okay, because that's key, because Monterey will be contributing population numbers to it, Seaside, Delray Oaks. So as long as those population gains go to those cities and not to Marina Coast, who's providing the water.
Yeah, we're not following the drop of water. There is a decoupling, if you will, once it turns into waste from a water right perspective. And then, if I may, Rachel was kind enough to give me her computer. So, the suggestion that you came up with, Supervisor Church, it does end up a total of 30 weighted votes. Salinas is at 30%, as you identified. The one voters are at 3.33% versus the 4.55s. Castroville at 2 goes from, well, I guess it's up to 2 now. So it would go to 6.67. The 3 votes, which would now be 4, are at 13.33 versus 13.64. So there's a slight decrease. And then of course, Pacific Grove goes from 9 to 10. The reason I convey that is just it's relatively small percentage changes in general, but it does reflect what you both were saying.
But it allows for growth in the future that is more equitable.
And the way it's done is 25,000 from 100,000 to 200 and 50,000 thereafter for an added vote. just to
right.
put some numbers to your suggestion.
Some public have been here waiting patiently, and there may even be some online that wish to speak. So let's go to the public. Mr. Tynan.
Chair. I just, a little history here is Moss Landing had a vote, and it was run so badly by the county that they asked us to take it over to operate it. Luca Cagno, who I have a lot of respect for, he really was against it because he thought it would throw off the balance of the peninsula versus the valley. And that's the elephant in this room, is how that balance comes out. Now, when Pacific Grove put a scalping plant in, did it lose a vote? Because this voting is based on what's contributing to the system. So if they're taking flow from the system, it seems like they should reduce their vote. Other thing is, can Salinas start a scalping plant and take enough water to where it's equitable to what they're contributing to make their vote? It's just a thought. It's just you want to be fair. Castroville, I think North County lost a vote with Moss Landing, and it should have been a unanimous vote to take it away, but it wasn't. So Castroville and North County lost some representation. So I think it's fair and equitable for everybody to get the balance that puts the valley and the peninsula back in some kind of voting order. Because right now, the way it is, it's not working. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tynan. Mr. Bruno.
Good evening, Paul Bruno, resident of the district. I think it's a district. I'm going to add another level of complexity. Go ahead and you're going to figure out voting and all that. But maybe we should try to fix, or maybe there's nothing to be fixed, but perhaps we should look at the subcommittees and how they operate. They're advisory. And if people are participating, entities are participating, they'd want to make sure they all have a vote. Maybe you should be looking at equal representation, one person, one vote on your subcommittees, and therefore you get good participation at the subcommittee level. People feel they're getting their input, but have that decoupled from the board vote, because it's advisory and you want people to participate, and you shouldn't have, if Salinas is there, they're it, or someone else is there. Everybody's out there putting in. So subcommittees where a lot of work gets done. And so maybe two-prong approach, have this vote, have that vote, present both to the councils, and maybe those who are feeling they're losing out a little bit will feel they actually got something else, some participation and some voice. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bruno. Anyone on the virtual attendees list willing to raise your hand and speak up?
There are a few. First, we'll hear from Susan Scavone. Go ahead, Ms. Scavone.
Hi, I'm entering into unknown territory here, so this may actually not be very helpful for you, but I would support some sort of facilitated discussion where you can feel comfortable and be able to talk amongst yourselves, as they say, and work some of this out and be able to voice whatever feelings or observations you may have about this situation pretty comfortably, and not to be offended by each other, but to have a facilitator that can help you talk about it so that all of the ideas that you may have could come out on a table and talk through this in terms of ideas for going forward. I get that it's a moving thing, and it probably is time to reevaluate all that weighted voting. And we are a growing area. So, and I'm not sure how many people this will add with Campus Town. Will be thousands of people in Seaside. And there's a lot of development that's going to be coming both to county cities around our county. So, yeah, it's a big deal. So I'm thinking facilitated discussions would be a really good addition. Okay, thank you for listening. I don't know if that was helpful, but that was my thought. Thank you.
Thank you.
And we will now hear from Melody Crislock. Go ahead, Ms. Crislock.
I think the problem here is power. As you'll recall, especially the people that represent the peninsula on this board, that this board blocked the Pure Water Monterey project for years when Salinas and the Valley had the majority of the weighted vote. Do you want to go back to that? I mean, right now it's pretty close, but I can't imagine you're going to get your city councils in Seaside and Pacific Grove and Monterey to buy off on giving Salinas more power when Salinas and the Valley were the ones that tried to block a water supply for the Monterey Peninsula. I mean, it's nice to talk about fairness and cooperation and all that, but when push comes to shove, Salinas doesn't play fair. They didn't play fair on LAFCO. Director Craig would not, she had no stake in the game, but she blocked the buyout. So I don't know where this goes, but I'm not comfortable with giving Salinas more power. I have seen them abuse it, and it makes me very dubious. And I can't imagine that the people on the peninsula aren't going to feel the same way when you go to your city councils. I don't think you're going to get people saying, sure, give Salinas all the power. Next thing you know, they'll be, stopping Pure Water Monterey or something because they feel the water's theirs. This kind of stuff has been going on, and we're not doing this in a vacuum. This has been horrible politics between the Salinas Valley and the peninsula. And you're talking about changing a vote that impacts that. And I would be very careful, and I don't think you're going to get anywhere with it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other members of the public? All right, seeing none, we'll bring back to the board. What is the board majority's pleasure here? Vice Chair Williamson.
I can't remember who said it. It might have been Luke, but I think it would be helpful for all of us to take this back to our respective boards just to kind of do a litmus test. Oh, was it Scott? Somebody said it. Somebody on this side of the room said it. I think it just would be helpful as a suggestion. I don't think we need to necessarily vote on it, but I think it would be helpful as we're going through this discussion. There might be 2 or 3 more by the time we have the next one or the one preceding that. Is it possible for all of us to kind of just get a sense from our boards how much there is willingness to pursue this? And I think in really trying to keep a balanced approach in this conversation, it's really about, to your point, keeping an open mind, are our boards open to that discussion? And if there's not, if there's one agency that's not, out of respect for everybody's time, I just want to be able to make sure that we're being clear about that sooner rather than later.
I would support that, and I do think Mr. Bruno's suggestion is really important, and we need to look at the subcommittees too. I think that's a very reasonable approach as well, to do this 2-pronged. So I think these 2 things need to go together, and if everybody can, I don't know, we of course got Brown Act, and I don't know who's meeting and how you can talk to, but at least get to the next month, have some discussion, get some feeling from where things may rest on your own boards, and we come back and discuss this in a month, maybe table it till then.
Would it be helpful in doing that sort of straw poll if we had staff put together something fairly clear in the form of a staff report that you could give to your own county administrator, city manager, general manager, to present a reasonable question to your boards on this issue? Would that be helpful? I'm seeing some.
Yeah, I think so. I would just acknowledge, like, we're just looking for a different formula, right? I'm not looking to take power away, despite public comment. I'm not looking to take power away from other entities. I'm looking for a way to figure out how to more clearly represent my community. And I'm grateful for the opportunity that everybody's willing to have that open discussion. So when we're coming forward with that proposed staff report, it's not, oh, Salinas wants this, and so we're going to lose voting power. It's, are you open to the discussion of a weighted vote change at Monterey One Water? That's the question to be asked.
So I should think the staff report ought to be even-handed in terms of increasing or decreasing weighted vote political influence in the question to your respective councils, and maybe it ought to look at if the change were implemented today, here's what the change would look like. But it also needs to look into the future, or we're just going to be revisiting some former future version of this board would be revisiting the future. But you probably ought to look forward to what the implications might be.
Could I,
Vice Chair Williamson.
I think that was part of the point that I was trying to say is, I think us trying to get too deep into the weeds about exactly what it looks like moving forward in the future.
Right.
Isn't,
We're not there yet.
oh, good word,
not there
good,
yet, yeah.
isn't a good use of our time, and actually could be deceitful, if you will, if we're trying to present an option that may not be the reality, right? And because, for an example, if we go with option B, I can't rightfully go to my council and say, we'll lose votes. I mean, we'll actually be gaining as a percentage of the weighted vote. So, you know, but getting into the details, I don't think is necessary. I think the point that I'm trying to make is like, is there a willingness to even explore that amongst our various boards? And then while I have the floor, I would just like to ask, I think Mr. Bruno brings up a really good point. I'm open to that in regards to what the committees look like, but I just want to understand from a legal perspective, does that create a problem with Brown Act if we try to change the structure of our committees?
I'm reticent to answer on the fly because I think there may be a solution to that. Hearing, you know, we need to look at how it's historically been done, what your JPA is, and given the organization, look at other options for structuring it. So I think it'd be better if you let me come back to you with an opinion.
Okay. Director Craig.
Yeah, just, and maybe perhaps reference the Transportation Agency of Monterey County, because they have an executive committee that has Salinas, 2 supervisors on there. I mean, it's clearly way past the weighted vote formula. So, and they absolutely vote on things and provide recommendations. So I think there is a potential solution, or I've just read it out Tamsy for breaking up. I don't know. Who knows?
All right. Well, if there's staff, do you think you have direction?
Crystal.
Question is whether
Crystal.
I mean, I think if I may, and I think Tyler and I are on the same page in terms of what we're asking is just are you open to having the discussion about changing the weighted vote formula? We don't know what that looks like yet, but if there's a particular entity that says no, then we need to be able to recognize that. I'm hoping that that's not the case and that all policymakers are open to both sides of an issue without saying no before it goes to any level of discussion.
So based on that concept, I mean, I would paraphrase some of the past staff reports just to provide the history and where we're at, and then let you all ask your councils and boards the question. I think the history and the structure we have is the information you would need to have those discussions with your other boards, unless you tell me something different.
Everyone okay? Director Coletti.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. It's going to have to, I mean, we're going to have the same discussion that each of our councils and boards, et cetera. There has to be a lot of context and examples. And believe it or not, there are people who don't read agenda reports.
Really?
And yeah, it's true.
I'm flabbergasted.
So even with that said, though, it's really you have to tell a story, a compelling story, and a compelling story that says you're going to lose, but you want to vote yes. And I don't, quite frankly, I think I'll be interested to see what you come up with.
I'll try to be the Hemingway of staff reports.
All right.
Wow. I look forward to this. Can we actually
Chat GPT.
All right. Anything else,
Absent.
directors? All right. Seeing nothing else, we will move on finally to, if I can get there, agenda item.
Sorry,
11. Oh,
I don't want to leave that. So Are we in agreement that we're not moving forward? I don't know if we need a vote on it, but
Well, if
like,
we-
I would hate for us to get to this point next month and one of our boards
If we
hasn't.
take no action. Then he
Could we
produces
table it to the next though, so that everybody has homework to go take it to their
Make a
respective?
motion to do
Just want to make
so.
sure that it gets, I don't want to get stuck in the rut here, right?
Right, so I'll make a motion because I'm talking the most on this topic. To give direction to staff to prepare a staff report. Seeking inquiry on whether or not each respective member agency is open to the discussion of changing the weighted vote. Secondarily, requesting that it come back and be agendized for the October M1W meeting for further discussion.
Is there a second?
That might be a little soon to have that go to all the entities
Oh,
and be
'cause
able
you guys have
to come back. So you might say November,
twice a month, or are you once a month?
just once.
Okay, so I'll make the friendly amendment to November.
And we have a second?
A second. A
And
second.
you're okay with the friendly amendment?
Yes.
Okay, we'll go out to the public. Seeing none, bring back for vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Please show unanimous, no abstentions. We get to Pure Water Monterey update. Mr. Lindell. Tell us about your
Thank
successes.
you, Chair Moore and Board. So on Pure Water Monterey, the original program, water production is steady. So we're into the first quarter of the new water production year, and quantities are where they need to be. On expansion, Chai is going to help me throw up what's new to your agenda staff report this month in case you don't read that staff report.
Trying to call us out. No.
We're going to, at this zoomed out perspective, you can see the top, the blue activity lines is the AWPF expansion. So that's a treatment plant expansion. Again, that contractor is going to give us a much more detailed schedule. I'll continue to distill it down for your perusal. We'll get 300 to 500 activities on that contractor schedule. Interestingly enough, we wanted to show kind of when we started design, July of 2021. And as mentioned by the general counsel and the GM, you can see that year we lost from when we finished design, which was April of 2022, to when we could actually advertise for construction, which was April 2023. So we advertised for construction the week after the WPA was signed. So that's not why I threw it up this time, but in the context of that conversation, word that year ago. And again, it puts a spotlight on that amendment to get us that extra year. I think the last thing I want to point out is we have some hard dates. So once we give a contractor notice to proceed, you can see the bottom right-hand corner of the blue activities. You can see AWPF expansion substantial completion. So that's a hard date that's now cast in concrete. If the contractor misses that date, substantial completion is also sometimes called beneficial use. So that's when M1W theoretically can crank up all of that new equipment, make that extra water. If he doesn't meet that date, it's a $3,000 a day liquidated damages. Okay, then we typically give them 2 to 3 months to be done. If they miss that date, that's an extra $1,500 a day. So again, it's a lump sum contract. The general contractor wants to get done and out of there as soon as he can. But if not, there's the date. And again, that puts the water purchase agreement in the context that can we meet the February 2026 date? Yeah, we've got a little float. Your program manager would like a lot more float, but we've got some float to work with again. And then if you drop down to the bottom, you can see when do we put water, the first injection to our wells. So you can see that injection well phase 4 is a little bit behind the AWPF project, but not a lot. So by August of 2025, theoretically, we could put that first tablespoon of water down the new wells. Okay. So again, we'll probably zoom in. I'll leave the big schedule out there for another couple months, but then every month we'll probably zoom in a little bit and then give you updates. We don't have any construction photos for you yet. But that way, as we track construction, inform you, keep you up to date on construction change orders, that sort of stuff, you'll be able to follow the bouncing ball. With that, I'll hand it back to the chair.
Thank you very much. Any questions, directors? Director or Vice Chair Williamson?
Isn't there enough capacity with wells 1 through 4 that we could potentially put some of the water of the expansion in prior to the use of 5 and 6, before 5 and 6 come online?
The short answer is yes, we'll probably start exercising those wells immediately. But again, when you're talking about starting up the new wells in the middle of the summer, that's not when we have a lot of extra water to inject. So
Yeah,
just,
that makes sense.
just by coincidence,
It works out.
it'll be that following winter when we'll really put the pedal to the metal and take advantage of the expansion.
Thank you for that clarification.
Any other questions? What's the total you've put in the ground so far? Total you have put in the ground so far?
1,200
12,200
acre feet.
12,200. Awesome. Thank you very much, Mr. Lindau. Update on capital improvement program.
Good evening, Chair Moore and board members. Jennifer Gonzalez, Engineering Manager, and I'm going to provide a brief briefing of the status of our fiscal year 23-24 CIP program. I came to you with 18 slides. I'm going to focus on 4 of them because I don't want to keep you here all night.
You don't mind? I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
Really? If you have specific questions, I'm happy to answer them.
That was just for you.
Go ahead.
Love you.
All right. Our CIP for this fiscal year includes 19 projects with a fiscal year budget of 9.7 million, plus several carryover projects and some grant funding in addition. We've got carryover totals from last year of about 1.8 million, and grant funds added to the CIP budget are about 4 million for this fiscal year. So we're at about 15.5 million this fiscal year alone. Go ahead to the next slide. So in addition to the 13 engineering department run CIPs, there are 6 additional projects that are being managed in conjunction with the maintenance department. So we're working together on those. Not on the list, but also managed by both of those departments are 2 SVRP projects. We've got a pond liner replacement for the 80 acre foot pond at the plant. And we've got a transformer replacement, and that's about $1.5 million worth of projects. And then in addition to that, something that Dave just talked about, one of our engineers is also running the phase 4 project for injection wells. So that's another 24 million over the next few years. And we can actually skip through the specific project slides. Unless anybody has specific questions, we can go back to those and go to slide number 16. And really the focus of the last couple of slides after we talk about all the great work we're getting done is that the cost of doing projects in general is going up. About 2 years ago, we came to you with a 5-year budget projection for projects of about $69 million. Re-looking at those costs with the new costs of electrical and everything else that has gone sky high, we're looking at around 61 projects costing about 115 million. So that's a significant increase. Now that assumes keeping those projects on the same schedule that we had looked at previously. So we're working on that right now. Okay.
Jen, can I interrupt you? Can you go back to that slide? I just want the board members to look at the blue letters there, because the Prop 218 we had put together, everything was predicated on funding infrastructure. With this dramatic increase in costs, working with Fred, it looks like we'll have to do some bond financing if we want to keep on tap or on schedule with those projects. So just dropping the seed right now. We need to look at it closer and see what that truly means and when that would hit. But wanted to be upfront about it.
And then the next slide talks about our 10-year program, which was originally about 152 million. And that increases to about 187. My crystal ball is not as clear going out 10 years as it is in the 5-year range. So that number could potentially go up as well. But we're working on balancing and managing those projects over the next 10 years. And with that, that assumes 93 projects over the next 10 years. So with that, I can answer questions on specific projects. All of our projects are moving forward. There are several in design, several in construction. We were looking at a construction map of the RTP the other day, and we're going to have about 6 different projects overlapping over the next 2 years. So lots and lots going on, and trying to keep everybody safe and moving forward. So with that, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez. We're keeping you busy. Questions?
Just have a general comment. To
Vice Chair Williamson, go ahead.
make. That's a significant amount of increase. And part of my concern is by I know we'll get into this conversation more later, but by deferring any of those projects, we can expect that, I'm sure, to increase in the future. And with the unknowns that exist there, who knows what that additional increase looks like, and kicking the can down the road type of mentality. So just part of my initial thought is, I hope we look at, I imagine that we'll have to do some level of bond financing, but what does that look like with a mix of maybe being a little bit more aggressive, just looking at options, a little bit more aggressive in our rates when we're looking at doing the Prop 218 next go around. So just because to me that doing bond financing is in a way still kicking the can down the road in regards to the cost burden. You're putting that on future generations as opposed to taking the responsibility now for deferred maintenance. So how do we find the right balance there, I guess, is the only point that I put to staff.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, we move on to agenda item 12, staff reports.
So we'll go into some good news first after these lengthy couple items. So we actually received, and I wish Mike was here. I think he's online. We've received an agreement with the Bureau of Reclamation on the $10.3 million grant that we received for Pure Water Monterey expansion. As you recall, it's their Title 16 WIN Act. We got $20 million for the first phase that's going, and we just received the agreement for the $10.3 million. So that's tremendous news. I guess it was 2 weeks ago now, I had the opportunity to go down to San Luis Obispo to the Central Coast Regional Water Quality Control Board, meet with their current executive officer who is retiring at the end of this week, and meet the incoming executive officer, Ryan Lodge, who has been with the regional board for about 20 years, obviously just stepping into a new position. So it was good to make contact with the new executive officer. I'm sure all of you already know, and Eric Tynan mentioned Lou Calcagno. Of course, he passed away. He was on this board for about 8 years, and he was chair for 2 years. So I just wanted to make that acknowledgement of his time here contributing to everything we do. And then tomorrow, we will be going to the City of Salinas Council to do a brief update on just things that we've done around here, as well as the potential to move to the tax rolls.
I just have a quick one. Unfortunately, today we had an SSO. It was real small. It was over there by the farm worker housing. Somebody hit a pole and also hit into our ballards and shifted the foundation. And so less than 100 gallons. I think they're reporting it at 25, but we we'll have to replace the entire ARV. But even though you have ballards, somebody, I don't know if it was a tractor, I don't know if it was a person after the Bronco game, I have no idea, but we had a spill from the ARV after somebody hit it.
Was this a hit and run?
Yes.
Yes.
Director Craig.
For the interest of those of us that have been on the board for less than a year, I need to know what SSO and ARV means.
SSO is the worst thing you can hear. It is a sanitary sewer overflow.
Oh, fun. Okay.
Yes. And what was the second one?
ARV.
Air release valve. So anytime you have a force main, you have to have in the high points, you have to have, it's basically an opening that allows air to release. So,
But not water.
yes, but not water.
Okay. Thank you. If we could refrain from the OMG LOLs, I don't know all of I don't know all of them just yet. So thank you.
Okay. I
Appreciate it.
apologize.
No, it's all good.
So Director Craig, an SSO
It's
is
late for me,
more
sorry.
commonly known as a PIP.
Performance improvement plan?
No,
Oh.
poop in public.
Actually, so. There be life problem.
No, it's poop in public.
Oh, noted. All right.
I had to report
I don't
that.
even know what to do with that, but thank you.
It's getting late. It's getting late.
Could you get me those HR forms?
Assistant Manager McCary, are you done?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, thank you very much.
Mike has his hand up. I don't know, Fred, if you have anything. Oh, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, I do. Just real quick. I just want to let the board know we're actually, unfortunately, we're having to deal with 3 audits simultaneously, basically. So we're basically preparing right now for our annual financial audit, which they will kind of work with us the first week of November. That's typical this time of year. The second thing is the board knows about this previously, but we're working right now with the Water Resources Agency on a 4-year audit. So we've been getting them a lot of stuff on that. They're still kind of in their first preliminary phase of it. They'll be coming out here probably sometime next month to do like a 1-week on-site basically audit in essence. So that's the second one. The third one we were notified this month is basically CalPERS. So what CalPERS frequently does is they will rotate on auditing different areas. So this basically has to do with our education, not just ours, but basically educational incentive program and how that's reported to PERS. So I have to give kind of a big shout out to Andrea, who's our payroll person. She's been doing great in giving them a lot of the data, but they will also be out here for on-site audit for a couple of days as well too in October. So just wanted to give the boards a heads up on those.
All right.
Oh,
thank
yeah,
you.
real fun. Yeah.
And we go to Mr. McCullough.
Thank you, Chair Moore. Mike McCullough. Just want a couple things to report on the proposed billing change. We had 2 meetings at the Cesar Chavez Library in Salinas in September. Supervisor Church also with the Board of Supervisors finalized the Easy Smart Pay program so that property owners will be able to pay property taxes via a monthly payment. And we are planning 2 more community meetings, community forums for Castroville. And we're also trying to get another community forum set up in South Salinas with some homeowners associations. So that's all I have to report on tonight. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any other staff reports? No. All right, we'll go to board member comments and reports. Anyone? All right, seeing none, we go to public comment on closed session items. Anyone wishing to address the board on matters appearing on a closed session may do so at this time. Please limit your comment to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Actually, I'm here. I might as well comment. You have an item upcoming on general manager, and I wanted to add a couple comments regarding Mr. Shudo. Definitely an intelligent and dynamic professional. Considered a fair and honest broker, and he's definitely respected in the community. So I can tell you this board is lucky to have him leading your organization. So he has my confidence. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bruno. Appreciate that. In which case, we'll go into closed session for agenda items 15A and 15B. A is conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation, 3 matters, and B is public employee performance evaluation, and no surprise, that is with our general manager. So why don't we take a 5-minute break and we'll All right, we are now at agenda item 16, announcements from closed session. There are no announcements from closed session, and it is 8:58.
Kids are
And
all the
we now
time.
stand adjourned.
Right on. I got married in the frog pond.
Stay for that?
We don't do it for